I will call that MFR out.
Girl, why were you raising money for Biden then?
Because I need to understand. I just told you.
No. I know you get real angry when people ask you that question,
Anna.
but you need to answer it. Don't yell at me.
No. Do you understand English? I just said I didn't.
do. You're lying, though.
Do you really think that we can trust Iran?
Yes.
We allow them to Anna.
Yeah, we had an
I don't trust Iran.
I know, but
a government.
Who cares? We deal with Saudi Arabia and their monsters. After 9/11, I wanted to bomb the crap out of Iraq.
When is American policy no longer made in America? Why are we doing this?
Because it has no effect on any American's life. Who cares who the leader of
women
Syria
they don't
is?
march
Who's the leader?
naked and shot
Okay,
in the
Jillian,
head.
why is the
That's
leader? It doesn't affect any American's
Actually,
life.
I agree
and we
with
don't
Ann. I
care.
agree with Ann, and I.
Human here, guys.
Wait, but why is that our responsibility? Why do we need to be the sheriff of the entire world?
We're so overrun here in America due to the illegal immigration.
right.
How are we meant to go and police on another place?
There's something else.
Welcome to Her Take. Guys, if you're liking the show, could you do us a big favor? Like, comment, share, subscribe. It goes a long way for us with the algorithm. And I'm really excited to say that our guest today is the one and only Ann Coulter. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. All right, we're going to jump right in. We're going to begin with a bombshell in the news. Former President Joe Biden has just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, this drops just a few weeks after the Robert Hur audio, where Biden struggled to recall basic facts about his son's death, his time as the vice president. And while the diagnosis is undeniably sad, it's raising questions about when did they really know? Is there a cover-up here? If so, why? And honestly, who in the heck has been running the country for the last 4 years? Lindy, I know you're super passionate and raring to go, so take it away here, kid.
Thank you. And my first gut instinct was that this is his attempt at a sympathy play, but this is going 180 degrees of what he intended it to be. The timing could not have been more interesting and more architected from my point of view. I think he had known for years that he has been suffering from something. And honestly, this is just yet another cover-up. It's the latest cover-up in the Biden regime. They covered up his cognitive decline. They covered up his health issues. They covered up everything. Everything. The Democratic Party has a tremendous truth problem right now with the American people. And because of the years of lying, they now have forfeited any trust that the American people had in them.
Could I say something?
Go for it.
I think we could surely speculate about whether or not they knew about his health condition, whether or not he had cancer prior to him running for a second term. What I think we absolutely could not speculate about is what his wife knew. And so for me, whether the Democrats did something nefarious to cover it up in hopes that he gets a second term, that's one thing. But the fact that Jill Biden was literally on that debate stage, we did it, Joe. All of that rhetoric, when your husband should literally be at home, in bed, recovering, for me, it's more of an indictment on her as a wife than the Democrats when we're just purely speculating whether or not they knew he had cancer. Now, they certainly knew about his mental decline. That much we've certainly ascertained, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the cancer thing, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Can I weigh on this with the health thing real quick? There's no universe where they did not know that he had cancer. There's a PSA score for men. He has advanced prostate cancer right now. They would have caught this in his yearly physicals. I've interviewed enough oncologists to know that I just find it almost impossible to believe we just discovered this. Now, I don't get the whole timing sympathy thing, and I'm going to pass over here to this side of the table.
I mean, I don't think that this was like some cynical ploy to garner sympathy or empathy for Joe Biden at a time when a lot of people are upset with him and the Democratic Party for the very real cover-up regarding his mental decline. I don't know whether or not they had caught this cancer earlier, he kept it on the down low, and is now going public with it. I have no idea, and I don't really want to speculate on it. What I will say is that once you're caught in the type of lie Biden and the Democratic Party got caught in, I don't really begrudge people for questioning whether this was a diagnosis that he knew about earlier and is now just coming out with it as if it's a new diagnosis. I just think they need to be honest. They need to build trust and credibility among the American people. That's going to take some time. But what I keep feeling from the Democratic Party is just this level of selfishness, this level of wanting to rise up the political ranks without being honest with the American people. And that's hurt the party overall.
I think it's a little late for honesty. I think there are only two interesting things about this. One is the reason any doctor who looked at him would have known that he had it for 8 years.
Absolutely.
But they couldn't let a real doctor look at him because a real doctor would say he's got Parkinson's. You got to get him out of it.
100%.
So by not allowing a real doctor to look at him, it just went on and on and on and on. And the other, I think, interesting thing is it was really weird that Biden leapt in and wanted a debate in June. It was because his poll numbers were going down. The Reagan-Carter debate was 1 week before the election. If they had waited and done it then, the media would have had to power through and say, no, his performance was fine. He's great. Never seen him better. He might have won re-election, and today Kamala would be our president.
Ann brings up a really good point because I want to talk about that doctor. You know who that doctor was? Kevin O'Connor. This is a family business associate. He had a financial interest in propping up the Biden regime, and that is a fundamental problem here. People lied about his cognitive decline because they wanted power. Let's be perfectly honest.
Like Jill.
About that. Exactly. Jill Biden, and I will name the names. Jill Biden, Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donnellan, Anita Dunn, Anthony Bernal. These were Jeff Zients. These were the people running our country. We had a council of presidents for the past 4 years. We didn't have an elected president. We had these unelected hacks who understood that Biden was our final gravy train, that as soon as he went off into the sunset, they were done. So they wanted to drag this on for forever.
Can I jump in on that? Because you mentioned all the unelected people who were involved in the cover-up of Biden's mental decline, which is true. But there are also elected lawmakers who are currently in Congress who also engaged in that cover-up. Representative Jim Clyburn, who's supposed to be like a sacred cow in the Democratic Party, knew of Biden's mental decline. It's outlined perfectly in that book, Fight. And basically, on the night of the debate, he got a bunch of invites to watch, like viewing parties for the debate. And he said, no, I don't want to go. He decided to watch the debate alone in case he cried over Biden's poor performance. Yes. How depressing is that?
Oh, wow.
That's fantastic.
Well,
Well, I have a question on what do you mean, though, the timing is suspicious? I'm not following your train of thought there.
I refuse to believe that Biden found out he had cancer literally did the day before Jake Tapper's book drops. I mean, I'm just sorry.
What's
I can't.
the connection? I don't get it.
Because Jake
people are supposed to feel sorry for him and they won't attack him.
And you know what?
One of them, like Carville, one of them,
I get it.
Axelrod went on TV and said,
Everyone calm
criticism of Biden should be muted now.
Exactly.
He's dying.
And Jillian, like,
I get it.
The book's about to come out.
I
got it. I
like
understand.
Meghan McCain.
But
But
I didn't know they cared, though. I'm so sorry. I mean, you propped up this guy who's been on death's door for 4 years, and now you care how
To
he
be fair,
feels?
David Axelrod was one of the few people who said that Biden needed to step aside. I like Meghan McCain, but I have to vociferously disagree with what she's been saying for the 24 hours, which is essentially give Biden and the regime a break. No, we're not giving them a break anymore. They lied to the American people. They got us in this leftist woke mess. They need accountability. I'm so sick.
Well, also, the media figures don't have prostate cancer. Okay, be nice to Biden, but you still got to hold Jake Tapper responsible.
100%. Let me ask you, ladies, what do you think about having some types of mandates in place to check out not only mental capacity, but also physical capacity? Because interestingly enough, Nancy Pelosi and I believe it was Jamie Raskin tried to introduce something in 2020 when they were actually concerned about Donald Trump. That then would have passed on to other administrations too. Anna, you look like you have some thoughts on that.
I mean, it's just interesting because the calls for a mental test for the president were loud from the Democratic Party as it pertained to Donald Trump, but obviously radio silence when it came to Joe Biden. Look, there are working class Americans right now who literally have to get drug tested to qualify for work.
Right.
If they have to get drug tested to prove that they are capable to do the job, how is it that the president of the United States doesn't have to pass some sort of physical and mental exam to make sure he or she, in the future maybe, is up for the job?
Well, I think it's a
agree.
bad idea, and it's really not necessary. The Democrats, because they have the media, could power through on this one. But boy, has it come to bite them in the ass. So I don't think somebody's going to do it again. And I just feel like anything like that, it can be made fun of, it can be manipulated. You get a political doctor, you attack the doctor. party's just got to be honest about this.
Well, we saw this in the very beginning. I remember, again, because I interview doctors all the time in all different subspecialties. And so many of them were suggesting, like, I think he might have Lewy body dementia.
Yes.
He might have
We talked about the Parkinson's.
Yeah, a form of Parkinson's. Like this, the writing was on the wall for this. So if I could be slightly conspiratorial here for just a moment, and of course everybody jump in and attack me, but I remember back in January 2024, we were seeing people like Megyn Kelly and Dave Rubin talking about the fact that there was a memo leaked and that the goal was to have a debate earlier, to discredit him early enough, to not have a primary, have an open convention, and then nominate the one that they wanted, which is exactly what happened.
Jillian, I
mean, really?
I don't think that's true.
That's
You
actually,
don't?
let me tell you what happened. The person behind the debate was a woman named Anita Dunn, and her husband is Bob Bauer, who's Biden's personal lawyer.
Okay.
She was the one who wanted the early debate. They actually believed that he was going to pull it off.
Come on.
They actually
No
thought,
way.
No, they actually did. And they were hoping, and unfortunately, I mean, everything went to shit. But let me tell you, things got so bad at Biden events, they confiscated my phone. They put it in a Ziploc bag outside of the venue, and I wasn't allowed to take any video. I was actually called out specifically, and they were told, I was told I was not allowed to post anything. I posted an Instagram story. I had a staffer from the DNC chair literally tell me, Lindy, take it down. They were censoring my own personal social media because I made them look old. And they were, the DNC, Jamie Harrison, I will call that MFer out. He was screening questions. He had us submit questions, and he would pre-approve them or not. And he would only pick 2 or 3 questions for Biden to answer. Easy, softball questions. And all of us were waiting at the edge of our seat with bated breath, just praying to God that he would be able to finish the sentence.
So you knew about his mental decline during the election.
And
but you continued raising money for his campaign.
No, I didn't. I went on air before the debate, actually, saying that he had declined. And you know what? They called me the night before because they post the Fox News Sunday guests in Politico. They called me and said, Lindy, we know you're the president's most loyal supporter. We know you're going to be loyal.
Wow.
I know. And this is like Tony Soprano
even
shit.
mean?
So the first time you spoke out about the Democratic Party was the night before the debate.
Or else what?
But
I think it makes them look too good to say they were trying to get him out. And as various people have said, some people depended on him being president, especially the entire Biden family. Oh, they are SOL now. Every other president retires and gets, $1 million speeches, and everybody wants to read the biography. The Biden family, he's always been the poorest senator, and they're not making any money now.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to have him speak. And Anita Dunn and the rest of them, Ron Klain, this was their path to power.
Exactly.
They did fight like banshees to keep him in. They wouldn't have fought that hard if they were trying. But a lot of people thought your theory could be true because, wow, did it happen that way?
It happened exactly the way they had predicted.
It took
I was
a
like,
few
all right,
weeks.
that's bizarre.
It took a few weeks. They fought like banshees.
Speaking of Anita, I would get emails from Anita Dunn saying, thank you for your loyalty. Just one line, and it was like they were running a mafia, I kid you not. And in 2023, I'm going to call somebody else out.
I'm going to give you a button after this.
Everybody knows that because they're witnesses. In 2023, I raised this concern about his conduct decline to Ken Martin, the current head of the chair. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I had witnesses when I did this. I had Wendell Pierce from The Wire, the shit guy. Remember? Shit, that's him.
Got it.
And then I had my brother and a room full of people saying, David Ignatius had dropped an article in the Washington Post on September 12, 2023. The retreat that we did in Chicago with Kamala Harris is September 13th. And I said to Ken Martin, are you not concerned about Biden's conduct decline? He's like, oh, no, don't be ridiculous. He made me feel like I was crazy.
I made everyone feel like they were crazy, honey. It's not
Okay,
just
you were right, Lindy. Let's move on to the next topic.
No, we're going on. We're going on, kid. All right, so the next big story is obvious. Donald Trump's recent trip to the Middle East, where he secured $600 billion from the Saudis, another $1.2 trillion commitment from Qatar. But what's driving the most attention is President Trump's reported interest in brokering a new framework with Iran that's aimed at easing tensions and addressing nuclear concerns. So, Anna, I know you're chomping at the bit on this one.
Yes.
Take us away.
Well, there's a really interesting divide currently taking place within the Republican Party between, I would say, the more traditional conservative Republicans that identify as neoconservatives and then the America First MAGA crowd that does not want to go to war with Iran, or they don't want to go to war with anybody, right? So Donald Trump has softened his tone in regard to Iran. You know, he was talking about bombing their nuclear sites incessantly, by the way, and all of a sudden he's in Saudi Arabia giving a speech kind of trashing neoconservatives. Let's take a look.
This great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done.
Now, if you take what Trump is saying there at face value and you're anti-war, that was great. But it's kind of hard to believe anything Trump says because he goes back and forth so many times. Now, some argue the money he's getting from Qatar, these deals with Saudi Arabia, the $2 billion that Saudi Arabia invested in Jared Kushner's investment fund, those are the motivating factors behind Trump's willingness to engage diplomatically with Iran to get a nuclear deal rather than bomb their nuclear sites. But Trump says it has something to do with this. Take a look.
You're right. The neocon element believes that war is the only way to solve things. And the president believes that his force of personality, the way he is going to respond to situations, can bend people to do things in a much better way in the interests of the United States government. And I believe in that, too.
Now, that's Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's golfing buddy, real estate investor. But more importantly, he is Trump's Middle East envoy. And he wants diplomacy, from what I've gathered, from what he's been saying and doing. But there's one other factor that I want to kind of bring into this, because Trump explains that he changed his mind on potentially going to war with Iran due to a conversation he had with Qatar's Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Let's take a look.
Iran is very lucky to have the emir because he's actually fighting for them. He doesn't want us to do a vicious blow to Iran. He says, you can make a deal, you can make a deal. He's really fighting, and I really mean this. I think that Iran should say a big thank you to the emir, because the emir is fighting very much that we don't. And there are many people that want me to go the other route. They say, just knock it out, because nobody can beat us. We have the strongest military in the world by far. Not China, not Russia, not anybody.
Now, the United States didn't do so great in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran's military is definitely more robust than Iraq's was, for instance. So going to war with Iran would not be a simple task, and it could potentially be disastrous for the American people. If it turns into a full-blown war, American soldiers could die. We should avoid war. So I love the fact that he's pursuing diplomatic means to get a new nuclear deal that'll prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. They just had their fourth round of talks. They did not reach a conclusion, but Trump says that they're getting closer. Whether you believe him or not, that's a different story. But I commend him for wanting to pursue this diplomatically.
Can
I'm wondering
I ask
what
you guys a
think.
bunch of questions and then okay, because my first thing is, why did you brag then for the past 8 years about how your strangulation tactics have worked? That you bankrupted them, you took out Soleimani, brag, and then complete, hard 180. In addition, which we're going to get to in a minute, we know that Qatar has invested more in America than any other country, arguably, and we'll litigate that in just a moment. But I question those motives for nefarious reasons, not just diplomacy. My next question is it ideal to sideline Israel? So think about all this and then get back to me. because they weren't a part of these negotiations, and they're our top ally in the region. And then the third part is, do you really think that we can trust Iran? So we allow them to
we had something called the JPCOA. Okay, that was the Iran nuclear deal that Obama and other countries, by the way, 4 other countries had negotiated with Iran. There were checks to ensure that Iran was not enriching uranium.
But he's going to
they
allow
would go
them to
into the
enrich
country.
uranium, though.
Huh?
He's going to allow
right now
them to do it.
I mean,
and then they're allowed to get to like 90%.
But there are inspectors, and
Yeah,
I'm glad
exactly.
you just played that what Trump said over there. This is one of the most important things of his presidency. It's
Agreed.
a huge change. The Trump doctrine. This is what the American people voted for. I have a chapter on him taking this position in Trump We Trust. It was one of the reasons I supported him in 2016. But then, first term, he appointed Jared Kushner president, and turns out we had to keep going around bombing everyone, like you mentioned Soleimani, which was a terrible, horrible idea. Let's just put that behind us. This is the new Trump, and this is the uniparty against the American people. We have zero interest in going to war with Iraq. A lot of Americans will die.
Yes.
A lot. We should not have military bases around the world. We have enough trouble in our country. The anti-war left and the MAGA right should come together, because this is and he said it in that speech. A lot of people want to go to war. Oh my gosh, and that's probably why he keeps saying these stupid things about, I'm going to stand up to Iraq. Or Iran, because there is going to be enormous pressure on him to go to war. We have no interest in going to war.
That's my question is, the leverage of getting Iran to comply is, if you don't comply, then I'll bomb you out. Doesn't he
What's
need
happened,
that?
if I could respond to that in particular, I used to wonder, why does Iran need nuclear power? Aren't they sitting on something else they can use for fuel? Well, yes, they can, but they export fuel. It's how they make money. So if they can get some of their energy from nuclear, there actually is a reason for them to have nuclear energy. Point 1. Point 2, every time Bush would walk away and say, no, not until you have completely dropped all of your enrichment, they would just keep enriching. And now they're on the verge of getting a nuclear bomb. If you had just negotiated with them and said, okay, you may enrich for nuclear power, but we're sending in inspectors, Obama wouldn't do it. Obama did do it. Bush wouldn't do it. Obama did it. My party went nuts. It's a better idea. Look, Pakistan has a nuclear bomb. We can't trust them. North Korea has a nuclear bomb. We can't trust them. It may be that at some point Iran gets a nuclear bomb. They're closer to it because we didn't send in inspectors. Yeah. This is huge what Trump is doing.
I
agree.
agree.
This is absolutely huge.
Totally
and
agree.
It's interesting how it didn't get that much press. It should have been a 2-inch headline at the top of the New York Times.
I agree with you that it's the most important story in the news today.
Okay.
I think that Donald Trump has really changed the Republican Party. I mean, I remember the Bush years. The Republican Party was the pro-war party. And to be sure, those types of figures still do exist within the Republican Party. But to answer your question about Netanyahu and him being alienated from these negotiations, let me make clear.
I know you don't like him.
No, I despise him.
I
but
get that you
putting that
despise
aside,
him, but
I can put my bias aside
Okay.
and just give you the facts, right? Netanyahu is the one who convinced Donald Trump in his first term to basically get rid of the Iran nuclear deal, because Netanyahu doesn't want a deal. He wants the United States to go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel, just as we did with Iraq back in 2003. In the lead up to the
war with Iran the first time.
In the lead up to the war with Iraq, you had the Israeli intelligence organization coming out and saying, oh, not only do they have weapons of mass destruction, Iraq is also developing bioweapons, and oh, it's so dangerous. So they had been pushing the United States to go to war with Iraq. We did go to war with Iraq. It was a complete and utter disaster. And if you go back and you read all the details about everything that happened before that preemptive invasion, okay, you'll see very similar trends. You'll see parallels. We should not go to war with Iran. We should approach this diplomatically. I don't want soldiers to go to Iran. I don't want people to die. I want a deal, and I want us to use our resources on the American people.
I agree with you. I'm simply saying we didn't go to war with Iran the first time, and it was like I bankrupted them. They were nowhere. Like, why not continued strangulation and sanctions? I don't trust Iran. I mean, the Sharia law, like, you're dealing with a government.
Who cares? We deal with Saudi Arabia and their monsters, and just I think I should probably defend the war in Iraq, since I was a huge supporter. So I just quickly want to say after 9/11, I wanted to bomb the crap out of Iraq and Afghanistan. I still would. But I didn't want to stay 20 years.
I can understand.
Nobody said we're going to stay 20 years.
But Iraq had nothing to do
That's what I was
with
gonna say.
9/11. I can understand.
The idea was, and some of it worked, some of it didn't, was that we wanted an Arab Israel. A lot of these, we don't need to relitigate it, but most of the Middle East either have sane people with a crazy leader or crazy people with a sane leader. What Iraq was actually pretty sane people. We have a lot of Iraqis who have immigrated to America. They're not like, Afghans. But if you got rid of their leader and, they did wave their purple fingers, I do think Iraq is better. Was it worth the price we paid? I don't know. Maybe not. I wanted to smash someplace in the Middle East. Absolutely, Afghanistan, you were never going to nation build there. Just bomb the crap out of them and pull out.
And the Taliban was supported by the United States government. I mean, we were funding them. We were giving them weapons to prevent communism from developing, right? A communist takeover from developing in Afghanistan. That came back to bite us in the ass. And
Trump was so right saying their nation building has created disaster.
Exactly.
It has never gone the way it was supposed to.
Well, I'm particularly skeptical about the Qatar piece. And then, of course, you've got the plane, which you guys wanted to talk about. So next up, let's take a look here at the plane situation.
Told that you wanted to address the gift that Qatar is giving to the U.S. government, to the Defense Department of this jet.
I see that this story is making a big story in the news. Look, we've been always there for the U.S. We've been a reliable ally for the U.S. And it's something between the Ministry of Defense in Qatar and the Department of Defense, and it's in the discussion between them and under legal review. Unfortunately, I see that this story is taking a different direction and is being more politicized while it's a normal government-to-government deal.
All right. So basically he's saying there's no there. But I read a brilliant piece in the Free Press, Barry Weiss's Free Press. Okay. So listen to this. They pull back the curtain on how far Qatar has gone to entrench itself into American life. So over the past 2 decades, Qatar has spent nearly $100 billion buying influence across our politics, universities, media, think tanks, and Fortune 500 boardrooms. And in 2017 alone, you'll get a kick out of this, they spent $225 million lobbying and on PR in the U.S. That's 3 times more than Israel and 2/3 more than China. So my question is, how deep is this flowing, and when is American policy no longer made in America?
So deep. And you know what?
Guys.
They are buying our minds. They're buying the future of the American people, the future generation, because you know what? They're also buying the Ivy League. And I went to Princeton, and you could see that the influence of the Middle East was everywhere. They purchased happy hours for us, social events. All of it was just bankrolled by the Middle East.
Sorry, did you want to finish your point? Sorry.
Not only that, this is I want to be intellectually honest here. I am a conservative now, but this is not a good idea to use to allow Air Force One to be created by or to be gifted to us by another country. We would literally have to take the plane apart to ensure that there are no listening devices. They could be anywhere.
But they do plan on doing that. But do you feel as if that is an indictment on Trump, though? Because to your point, he's there. He's going through all of these diplomatic talks across both sides of the aisle. We're recognizing this is a good thing. Would it really be a good standard for him to begin those talks by rejecting a massive gift from them? I mean, in any culture, it can be bad to reject gifts, but especially in those types of countries. My boss, he grew up in Dubai. He has explicitly said that would have been considered so rude if he had started off the diplomatic tour by rejecting blatantly a gift of that magnitude, and it could have impacted him.
He could have just simply said, this is going to give the appearance of corruption, and I don't want, the American people to think that you're buying me off. He could have rejected it in a polite way, but this is actually not just about Qatar. Okay, this is a broader issue of foreign influence of our government. And, I call into question, the idea that Qatar is the top issue here. Qatar's a problem, but Qatar's one of the countries in a whole litany of countries that have been, corrupting our politicians. I mean, just in the last election cycle, the Israel lobby spent $127 million buying our politicians. So, I mean, do you think we're sending
ideology?
Do you think we're sending
the ideology, Anna? So they have close ties.
No.
To Anna.
We got to get the
Taliban,
corruption out.
Hamas.
You think all the foreign leaders spending $200,000 on Mar-a-Lago memberships every year are doing
I think
it?
it's all wrong.
Yeah.
The only reason this
they want
concerns
to
me-
have access and
Okay, go. I can
influence
see it.
the
Go.
president.
Go ahead. Go.
It's simple.
Well, I'll let you have Mar-a-Lago. I don't really see Qatar. Where is the influence? I mean, you have a quid pro quo. Where's the? What are we getting? Are they influencing politicians?
Well, they are.
Still
Okay,
talking.
keep going.
I don't see enormous influence. You have them certainly. Certainly, Israel has its own influence. I don't think we care about this area of the world. I think this is part of Trump saying we're going to do business with you. We wish you well.
Yes.
We are not going to go in, invade, try to change cultures we don't understand. And as for the listening devices, it does not matter. Trump is going to call up Maggie Haberman and tell her everything anyway. So it doesn't matter with Trump.
So I just want to say that in terms of the specific instance of influence, Qatar is the same country that Jared Kushner threatened to blockade in return for $1.5 billion of help for 666 Fifth Avenue. This is the same country.
That isn't corrupting our politics. That is corrupting Jared Kushner. And where is the prosecution? I agree with you. Where are the Democrats? You actually have something that is disgusting corruption in the Trump family. And they're just walking around. No, let's say Trump is a Russian agent. Whoa, that's way better. No, you have real corruption here. Where are the Democrats on this? Where are the prosecutors on this?
And you brought up a really good point that I also want to address. You talked about diversity of government, right? Democrats, you said like we're not going to go. No, you said
diversity of
what
government.
you meant was like they're not going to go in. America's not going to go in and monitor human rights. You alluded to that, did you not, or did I?
I didn't say anything about diversity.
Okay, well, this is what I mean. Trump is actually focused on real diversity, allowing different sorts of governments to thrive in their particular milieu. Like in the Middle East governments are not going to thrive in the United. Do you understand? Like he's not going to dwell on Jamal Khashoggi anymore. The Biden regime did.
I don't think he ever dwelled on Jamal Khashoggi.
And for anybody who doesn't know who that is, that's the American journalist that was
Can I please finish?
Dismembered and assassinated.
In Saudi Arabia.
What I'm saying is Trump's speech was extremely significant because it signaled a new direction in American foreign policy. We are not going to police the internal affairs of different governments. That's what I mean by diversity of governments. Under democratic regimes, we are so obsessed. They are so obsessed with policing human rights violations, of saying this is wrong, this is right. You got to do things our American way. But Trump is saying it's almost like benign neglect. If you can do business with us, if you can engage in these transactions, that's great. Let's all become wealthier. Let's all strengthen our economy.
Hold on. Are we okay? Listen, if we're saying it doesn't matter that these atrocities are occurring around
Trump doesn't give a shit.
Are we saying
Americans don't?
we
How about Rwanda? How about Saudi Arabia? How about North Korea? We aren't the world's policemen. And
I
by
agree
the way,
with that.
This is not.
we also put sanctions on that behavior.
Well, they shouldn't have.
Really?
Just leave them alone.
I
They
actually
shouldn't
agree
be
with
going
that,
around playing chess with the universe. It never works. And Trump ran on this. I don't know if you guys remember South Carolina, most military state, pro-military state. Before the South Carolina Republican primary in 2016, that's when Trump told Jeb that his brother lied us into into war. It was a huge mistake. And all of it, this is one of the many times Trump was supposed to, he's done, he's finished, he's done. And then he won the South Carolina primary. People are sick of war and not producing the beautiful results. I still think the first part of Iraq and Afghanistan were good.
None of that one tight.
Yet and still, it was right after 9/11. We haven't had another 9/11. Let the rest of the world be. We have enough problems in our country. How about guarding our border?
I'm not asking to go in militaristically, but
That's what it always leads to.
Yep.
But okay, we haven't gone in militaristically, but we had sanctions on Syria, which we agree we would touch upon. Okay, no, this guy, the interim president, is that what we're referring to him as? I mean,
Yeah, that was a great idea, by the way.
I mean,
Yeah,
can
he's
we-
so much better than
This is
Assad.
what- can we
Brad,
pull up
remove
the
the
Tulsi Gabbard clip?
leader around.
Okay, so
An al-Nusra leader, terrorist.
Okay, more to my
job,
point.
foreign
So
policy
You've
crew.
got Trump saying this guy is good-looking, strong leader, whereas Tulsi Gabbard just a few months ago in her Senate confirmation hearings was like, this guy's arguably worse than Assad. Are you happy now? Can we see
She's
that
right.
clip, Nat?
To train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like al-Qaeda taking power. I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
and
not
I understand,
in our
but I appreciate your answer and thank
All right,
you.
so long story short, Tulsi basically says exactly what you just said. And my question is simply, okay, you don't want to go in militaristically, I agree. I don't think that condoning it or lifting sanctions, I don't understand why we would do that. It's because we want their oil. Why are we doing this?
Because it has no effect on any American's life. Who cares who the leader of Syria is? Who's the leader?
Naked and shot.
Okay, Jillian,
Why
who's
is
the
it our
leader of
responsibility?
Burkina Faso? Who's the leader of the Maldives? Why do we have to pick one enemy in the universe and convince Americans he's like Hitler, he's like Hitler? Whether it's Putin or this new leader, it was Assad. I mean, we keep playing chess with the universe. It doesn't affect any American's life.
I
and
agree
we
with
don't
Ann. I agree
care.
with Ann, and I
Human here, guys.
But why is that our responsibility? Why do we need to be the sheriff of the entire world? I actually agree with J.D. Vance. The standard we should set is if Americans can't locate it on a map, we don't care. We just step away and figure out our own problems.
And
because
no
frankly,
fair going to Wikipedia.
And I think
Exactly.
I think the point that Ann's getting at, and I agree with this entirely, is every time the U.S. meddles in a foreign country's business, it backfires. So, for instance, the Grand Ayatollah and the supreme leader in Iran,
the regime change.
it wasn't just regime change. Our CIA orchestrated a coup to dispense of a democratically elected leader and essentially install a puppet government. That ended up
I disagree
backfiring.
with you there. That worked beautifully until Carter abandoned him. That's what killed Iran. I mean, he was a nut. The one that the CIA deposed was a nut, and we had the Shah, and he was great. And it was, this uprising that Princeton professor said it's going to be great, and then we have our hostages taken. No, that was entirely Carter's fault.
Well, this leads to the question of Ukraine. Like, should we
Same
be spending
game.
billions of dollars
No.
on a country? Like, I actually agree with that. We need a measure of accountability, and I have very little faith in this Zelensky dude.
And who cares?
Well, here's who cares. Here's who cares.
Well,
Again,
actually, and I think I'm just arguing for the other side.
No,
I'm
he's
saying,
not Hitler.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying I agree with it. Some people are saying we ought to care because China's watching closely. And
Who
they're going to
cares about China?
What
That's
kind-
our next enemy. Oh my gosh, these China hawks are the ones driving me crazy. Let Japan deal with it.
well, okay.
It's closer to them.
Here's why I wonder about Ukraine and the regime change. Simply because, again, if I was to wrap myself in tinfoil, I don't know if any of you guys have ever read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This book is crazy.
By whom?
Gosh, I can't remember his name. Will you pull it up for me, Nat? But it's a biography. So this guy essentially worked for these global countries, and he would go into parts of the developed world, and he would sell them on how we were going to help them develop their infrastructure to access their raw materials, energy, minerals, so on and so forth. And then this small country would default on the loan, and the World Bank goes in, and they're like, uh-oh, I guess you're in debt, and we're going to need to take everything. Now, this looks strangely familiar to the fact that all of our tax dollars paid for all these bombs to the military-industrial complex. Then the World Bank says to Ukraine, hey, you took all this money. I guess you're going to have to put that farmland up for lease. Enter Monsanto, Cargill, ConAgra. What's the third resource that they have? Well, if you don't call, us making, or our global countries making money off the weapons, then our farming, big ag, takes advantage of the farmland, the minerals. And now we've struck a deal for that too. Like, again, I get that it's conspiratorial, but damn it if it didn't play out just exactly as it always does. And we were engaged.
I think we paid for those minerals.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars we've given them against I guess,
but
Anna and my
we gave it to them in the
vote.
form of weapons. Zelensky said that to Lex Fridman on his show, and he's like, you guys didn't give me money.
Yeah, but okay, but taxpayers paid for it.
Exactly.
But we paid for it, but we aren't going to benefit off those minerals. It's going to be corporations like
But that's
BlackRock,
how it
Vanguard,
works.
State Street.
Capitalism, baby. American-based
But
companies
that
want
doesn't
access to
benefit
natural
us.
resources
It's
all across the
money
globe.
laundering.
And in the past, we have pursued those natural resources through war. I think it's better to pursue them through diplomatic means.
I don't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
I'm simply talking about the fact that when we look the other way as atrocities occur, when do you get into a World War II situation when you've exterminated 6 million Jews? Like, where is the line? If we condone it,
It's got to be a lot closer to exterminating Jews than, and I'm sick of every world leader being told this one's Hitler, that one's Hitler. It's very rare that a Hitler is going to arise. We'll deal with it when it happens, but oh my gosh, it is not Rwanda. It is not Ukraine. It is certainly not.
And do we want these
Iran.
countries as enemies, right? Like, wouldn't it be better to have that level of diplomacy, to have them as an ally versus having them against us? I mean, if there was some type of conflict to erupt where all of a sudden there was a proxy war that we needed to get involved with, don't we want to maintain diplomacy with some of these countries? Isn't that important?
I would talk
And also-
to enemies, but I would definitely define them as enemies, and I would put sanctions on them.
And Jillian,
These are atrocities that I simply can't be like. And not
This
only
is why
that,
so many people around the world, I hate to say it, but hate America. We're meddling in all these countries. Let them run. I loved Trump's speech. Let them run their countries the way their culture dictates. It doesn't make any difference to us. I don't even want to trade with them, to be honest. I want to make our own stuff here. I want to block immigration. I want to be America alone. We don't. Why does it matter to us to fiddle around with other
I agree
countries?
with that. I live in the city of Philadelphia. Luckily, I'm in a part that's safe. But if you just drive a few miles out, maybe 2 miles out, it's literally a war zone. Like Kensington.
Can we fix
People
our
are
communities?
people are
Yes.
desecrating on the
Yes,
street.
yes, yes.
They're getting high, literally on the sidewalk.
does that
we
have to
don't
do with
have
what we're
there's
There's
just
a lot of suffering in America,
I would rather
and our
use-
tax dollars. I'm sick of seeing my tax dollars go toward bullshits.
I
Okay,
get it,
in foreign
Anna.
countries,
But-
I don't want my money going toward bombs. I don't want my money going toward bombing people, killing people. I want my money to make the lives of the American people better.
All right, I'm going to
That's
put a
where I'm
button
at.
on this in 2 seconds. My simple question is, outside of war, which I am against and agree with you both on, and it goes nowhere good, and we've seen it over and over and over in the last 50 years. With that said, could you not dangle the carrot of business with America? Stop killing women who take off their hijab. For God's sake, don't march.
Why do we need to be the DEI police of the world?
We've been
though?
trying that for 20 years, and guess what they're still doing?
And also-
Whipping women who take off their
We
hijab.
don't even
Something
maintain
else-
our American identity
Yeah,
and culture
wait.
here. How are we going to go and control and insert our identity and culture into other places?
Well,
We're
when you're-
so
when you're
overrun here in
dangling
America
in-
due to the illegal immigration.
All right.
How are we meant to go and police that in other
There's
places when
something
we can't
else.
do it
One
here?
By
final point.
incentivizing them with these business deals.
One final point, though, that we haven't yet mentioned, this also opened us to charges of hypocrisy. For example, when we talk about Tiananmen men and the Uyghurs in China, you know what they're saying about us? They're saying you're the ones who are discriminating discriminating against Native Americans and Black people. That's what the Chinese are now saying about us.
Right.
20 years in Afghanistan, 20 years putting Afghan women into the police force and painting their George Floyd murals. 20 years, and at the end of it, Pew takes a survey, 99% of Afghans want to live under Sharia law. It doesn't work.
Like they want
Stop
that.
it.
It's their
Let
own
them live
culture.
the way they want to live. It's not our culture. And thank God for that.
And that, my friends, is exactly what I meant about real diversity. That is a diversity we should seek. Let people be. Let these cultures be. Not this DEI woke bullshit that we have going on in this country. The real diversity we want is benign neglect to our enemies and allies alike, and just let them thrive under their own government.
Okay, moving on. Moving on. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act. From one monster topic to another here. All right, so this features an extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts. No taxes on tips, which was hugely popular. No taxes on overtime pay. Mandating 80 hours per month of work, volunteering, or education for Medicaid eligibility. An increased tax deduction for seniors, beefed up border security, bolstered energy supplies, among other things. But it did not pass. So on May 16th, 2025, the bill was blocked in the House Budget Committee. So 4 Republicans voted it down due to concerns of overspending. It didn't cut overspending enough. And a 5th one opposed it on procedural grounds. I have no idea what that means.
Hold on, can I jump in?
Yeah.
You know that it got approved in the committee just last night, right?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. It just got approved in the House Budget Committee. They advanced the bill.
Really? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so fantastic. So where are we now then?
Not that fantastic.
Oh, you don't like it? Okay.
Well, I mean, we can still talk about the reasons why it was opposed by so many people, because I think there's some really good points.
No. They haven't done a floor vote yet.
Okay.
So there's still
Memorial Day is
But can we presume, though, that the fact that they brought on these 5 Republicans who said no, that it's likely going to pass?
Well, there's going to be opposition in the Senate because people like Josh Hawley Josh Hawley said not only is it politically stupid to cut Medicaid and Medicare benefits, it would be politically suicidal. It's like morally wrong.
So here's my understanding of this. And for me, I really am not a big fan of these big omnibus bills in general, because oftentimes it's a way to take public sentiment, something people want, and then they sneak in nefarious things in the back end, hoping people either won't notice or their desire for the front-loaded thing supersedes the thing that they don't want, right? We saw this when the Democrats were trying to pass their border bill, and they put a huge indictment on Republicans. Oh, they don't want us to pass this. No, we don't want money for Ukraine. There's a very big difference. The thing that Republicans seem to not like about this bill in particular is that a lot of the tax cuts are actually backloaded, and then it's going to increase the deficit much, much faster. So, for example, a lot of the benefits that people are hoping for won't even take effect until after Trump leaves office. For example, some of the rules and regulations that they want to put against Medicaid, for example, to require able-bodied people without children to be able to work. Sounds great to me. Let's assign the funds to people.
I want to litigate that because it sounds great to me too. I don't get it.
But
What's the pushback?
Well, it does sound good on the surface.
This is where people, it seems that people are more so upset about its implementation, because he is not requiring this to take effect until 2029. He's already out of office by then.
That might be on purpose, because this has been tried before in the past, right? So, look, I don't have a problem with having work requirements for able-bodied people who receive Medicaid. The problem is about 64% of Medicaid recipients, and remember, Medicaid's different from Medicare. Medicaid is run by states. 64% of them are either working full-time or part-time. The rest of them are not able-bodied, or they are taking care of family members who are ill, either elderly family members, or they're going to school. And the way that the bill is written right now, I think it was like, oh, well, to qualify for Medicaid, you have to work for at least,
80 hours in a month.
Whole month,
Yes.
right? Which isn't that much, but most of the people who can work are actually working right now. The other thing that I'll just note, and this is important because they have tried this before, and it ended up costing more money because you have to set up the bureaucracy to process people's applications and ensure that they're actually working to receive
But that's
the Medicaid
a one-time
benefits.
cost,
Right?
right?
No, you have to. So in Georgia, they had implemented it in Georgia. It cost $26 million to initially implement it, and then another $40 million to continue the program. And the Government Accountability Office put out a report about it that you could read, and it's very detailed. So
eventually it would zero out, right? Presumably.
I mean, I think that there's this mistake in thinking most people who take food stamps or Medicaid are like, all of them are lazy bums and they just want to live off the government.
I would say a lot.
Based on what? What's your evidence of that?
There are so many instances of people, like in Philadelphia, for instance, there's so many, even
I don't care about your anecdotal evidence. What's like the data? Do you have
People,
data?
yes, it's been studied. Every government program is 60% fraud. And the Social Security disability, it's actually led to some horrible things to get your kids. If you pay people not to work, they're not going to work.
Right.
Where's
The
the
veterans
incentive?
benefits, the Social Security disability, and you have all these parents living off claiming their kids have, what is it, ADHD?
ADHD.
But in order to collect all that money, you have to put your kids on psychotropic drugs. So they're drugging their kids.
Wow.
God, that's
and there was a
terrible.
family up in Boston that were murdered their child with these drugs. They were living 100% on 4 kids whom they claimed disability. And, you know, you give them these horrible drugs. I mean, I think we should have charity hospitals and send it back to the states because every government program, you know, they got rid of welfare, sort of work requirements back in '96. And Social Security disability, it's like welfare goes down, Social Security disability goes up. If you're going to pay people not to work, it is always going to be scammed. Elon can't do enough cuts.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what?
I hate my party for not just putting the Doge cuts into this big, beautiful
I
bill.
agree with that.
So I think it's a bad
haven't
look.
they
Hold
called-
on. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go.
Just real quick, I have a question. I'm really curious what you all think. I mean, don't you think it's a bad look for Trump, who's really presented himself as like this right-wing populist, to give these massive corporate tax breaks, massive tax cuts, which benefit the working class a little bit, but disproportionately benefit the rich, and then at the same time try to do these cuts to food stamps and Medicaid?
Well, 2 points
yes,
about
wait,
that.
I do agree.
The 2 points about that. How do you give tax cuts to people who don't pay taxes? Because let's not forget, 40% of the American people don't even pay
Earned
income
income
tax. They
tax
don't
cut.
pay
It's another
taxes.
welfare payment. It's welfare.
Exactly. And I just want to say something. I feel deeply about this issue. I grew up so poor, like painfully poor. When I was a kid, I would count pennies on my bed. And I worked at Wawa for $9 an hour. My family did not take a single penny from anybody, private or public. We worked our asses off. So I have a very particular attitude towards poverty and individual responsibility to extract yourself from that adversity.
Medicare and Social Security are the only programs that aren't scammed because it's just a matter of your age.
Exactly, 100%. And the other thing, though, the issue with the Medicaid, the other aspect was that they're saying that for blue states, they could actually introduce programs that would you wouldn't have to go and work those 80 hours as long as you're fulfilling these specific programs. And states like California, New York, you know they're going to create the easiest program ever to satisfy. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're forgiven and you don't need to go through that. So to your point about the thing that I saw in the bill about the cuts affecting corporations versus individuals was with solar. Did you see that? So essentially the way that it works is the tax cuts that individuals get on their solar are wiped out, but corporations get to keep them.
Oh, wow.
And so over time, it's not going to make fiscal sense for Americans to purchase solar panels, but rather lease them from these corporations. So that was one of the major things I saw in the bill that reminded me of what you just said.
And look, I never thought I was going to say this in my career, but it's true. The fiscal hawks are correct in being worried about our debt and deficit. Okay, we spent $1 trillion servicing our debt last year. That's insane. That's insane.
And we just want to go back to pre-COVID spending, and they can't do that.
It looks
were
good
we, you know, all living in poverty, orphans on the street back in 2019?
Right, yeah. It looks good on a 10-year window, but then there's also the 4 years for lobbyists to come in and undo a lot of those back-end cuts as well. And so it's just they need to balance the budget. If they're going to introduce all of these cuts, they need to take down some spending. They need to consummate some of the Dodge things as well that they have not consummated yet, right? Like, why is that? Why can't they put that towards balancing the budget
You bring
overall?
up a really good point. Elon caught so much flack for, wielding a chainsaw on stage. I actually agree with that. I think we need that attitude towards the federal government.
Well, this is why we need Trump to do something. One of the things that made me the angriest about January 6th, besides looking like dorks, was that we suddenly realized how much power Trump had all along. If he had ever said, come to Washington, I'm giving a speech on the ellipse, and we're not shut down because of COVID. And then he tells them all, okay, you're going to march peacefully to Congress and talk to your senator and representative and ask for funding for the wall and ask for, you could do it right now, and ask for the Doge cuts. Trump has so much power with his voters. Use it for good. Not for a riot
I have mostly
Congress.
questions, though, about this. This whole show is going to be questions for me. Here's what I am not understanding. everybody seems to think it's a bad idea to cut Medicaid, though. Like, I could show you a video of Steve Bannon saying...
I don't think it's a bad idea, actually.
I think a lot of big friggin' Republicans are like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So...
Because their constituents rely on Medicaid.
But then
and it'll be politically unpopular.
And by the way, I'm so confused because I didn't find it. Where's the cut part? The only thing I see is
it's
you have to work.
Requirements.
How is that a cut?
Right.
I don't get it.
Right.
Where's the
Basically,
cut?
they're hoping.
Am I a moron?
Well, they're hoping this is how they see it as a cut. Basically, some people are going to have difficulty, proving that they're working or logging on to whatever system they set up.
So that's the cut? It's a hypothetical cut?
That people are just going to have a difficult time.
I suppose the idea is, and this did kind of work with welfare reform, to be fair to welfare reform. The reason you want people to work isn't just because you want to save money for the government. It's for dignity and showing the next generation this is what you do. And,
Absolutely.
And a lot of people got off welfare when they did put in welfare reform in 1996. It actually did work.
There's one other part of this equation that I'm curious what you all think about, because we don't know what the end result of Trump's trade wars will be. But if he does actually go through with astronomical tariffs on our trading partners, make no mistake about it, there will be job losses in this country. Companies will shut down. And if the unemployment rate goes up, and it's harder to qualify for Medicaid if you lose your job and you can't find work. Isn't that kind of messed up?
Okay, I see that.
Well, wouldn't that inspire people to get off their butts and actually
work? I watch
work?
MSNBC all day, and it's all about what if. I think the tariffs are going to work. I think it's good. Other countries are going to drop their tariffs. I think he's going to bring down drug prices. I think not going to war is going to be great for the world. And all I hear let's see.
Can I
maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong.
I have something to say about that. And as someone of Chinese descent, I think it's significant. Ever since China entered the WTO in 2001, it's been taking advantage of us. It's been exploiting the system. The system has been fundamentally unfair. They've been stealing our tech. They've been stealing our proprietary information and then building their economic engine.
And we've been exploiting their workers.
And Trump needed to do something. Someone needed to be brave enough, willing to bite the bullet and take on the panicins of, both the uniparty, the phrase that you just used. And he's willing to do it. Let's give him 90 days to sort it out. I actually have faith that something will be done under his leadership, because the current status quo is fundamentally untenable. And God forbid, if we ever go to war with East Asia, we cannot be dependent on them for rare earth minerals, for instance. We just can't. We need to
Under
be
the
more.
Trump doctrine, we will not be going to war with them.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope.
This is... Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was just... The other thing that I noticed that people were annoyed about this bill is that one of the mandates that Trump got in on, fixing the economy, catering to the average person, the American worker, no tax on tips, no tax on overtimes, no tax on Social Security, those are only temporary as well. It's like all of the good things are only temporary, and then all of the cuts are meant to take effect like way later. I am Team Trump all the way. I don't know if Trump even fully knows what's inside of this bill. Can he even count on all of the people around him to be completely transparent about why people would be objecting to this in the first place? I can understand why people are not down for this thing. And I really hope that Republicans are able to come together. They're able to make some adjustments, because you can't just tell people that we are going to take away all of these taxes, all of these tax cuts later on, and then increase all of this spending, and then say it's not going to affect inflation and standard of living, because it will. All of the benefits are backloaded.
Well, this harkens back to what Nancy Pelosi said. We have to pass the bill in order to find out what's in it, right?
Oh, God.
That sounds great and not dysfunctional at all.
Right, right. Okay, are we ready to move on from this one?
Yes.
I have one last question, because I think that people are hearing about this and they're not sure, and it's slightly divergent, is the downgrade in our credit that they're tying to this bill. So Moody's Corporation apparently downgraded America's credit from AAA to AA1. And if you think, well, what does that mean and who cares? It's been suggested that it's going to be passed on to everyday Americans through higher interest rates on loans, home loans, car loans, student loans, and so on, and that it could devalue the dollar, which would drive up inflation. Now, I'm not an economist, And a couple of people are like, no, this is rhetoric. It's baloney. And they're just using this to attack Trump. But then other people say it's significant and it's of concern. What do we think on this one, team?
I think it's politically driven, and I think the timing was extremely significant. I think it's an anti-Trump move. I absolutely do.
It's not good. What's happening? It's out of my wheelhouse.
It's valid, though, correct? I mean, because it's based on, as you and I were just discussing, it's national debt.
Our debt.
Like it's
based on
real.
our debt.
It's a problem.
And the reason why Moody's lowered our AAA credit rating is because of the fact that you have this impending bill that, as it's written right now, is expected to increase our debt by $5 trillion.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So I get where they're coming from. And, if for as long as I've been in this, industry, the Republican Party has repeatedly said that they're concerned about the debt and the deficit.
Mm-hmm. And then they do nothing.
Exactly. In fact, no, they do worse. They exacerbate the issue.
So bottom line is, we're hoping there are still significant changes to come with the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
All right, and I guess that remains
I think it's
going to
take Trump putting pressure on them. He could do it, but he doesn't seem to be doing it.
And just making those adjustments. I just hope that there are people that he's willing to listen to who are honest with him about the real draw. Because I honestly am not 100% convinced that he even knows why people are so opposed to this.
All right, moving on. This one's a bit scandalous, but of course, Trump is trolling the Clintons again. So he just posted a video on X about how several people around the Clintons have mysteriously passed away over the years. Let's take a look.
Kennedy Jr. He was declared the front-runner for the New York Senate seat back in 1999. Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival, Hillary Clinton, was elected senator. Mary Mahoney was a Clinton White House intern. She knew enough of the inner workings of Bill's sexual advancements to be a star witness during the Clinton impeachment trials. She was brutally executed at a Starbucks she was managing in 1997. In 1993, White House counsel Vince Foster was found dead in Fort Marcy Park near D.C. He supposedly killed himself, and among a lengthy list of potential foul play, the bullet was never found. Then there's James McDougal, a key witness for White House prosecutors. He was serving his 3-year sentence for bank fraud at the Fort Worth Federal Medical Center in Texas. And just before he was to give a testimony before the grand jury, McDougal suffered a heart attack in solitary confinement. In 2015, Walter Scheib, a White House chef hired under Bill Clinton, joined the list. His body was found at the bottom of a river, nearly 2 miles from the base of the trail he was reportedly hiking. An autopsy determined that Scheib's death was accidental drowning, but he might have known too much. 27-year-old was shot and killed in
I think, Nat, I think we get it. Here's the only thing that I will say is I have heard this quite often over the years and obviously dismissed it as being absurd, but when you start to listen to individuals like Rogan who talk about this guy, Vince Foster, and where they found his body, like his blood wasn't on the scene, so it was clear they had moved the guy's body. Like each and every one of these does seem to be a little bit suspicious. So, I mean, is this absurd or not, Anne?
It's absurd.
It is.
The one that you mentioned, Vince Foster, I didn't know you were going to spring this on me. But I looked at it to write my book, High Crimes and Misdemeanors, arguing for Clinton's impeachment. And no, it was a nonsense story. It sort of ginned up right-wingers. It's funny, so people will repeat it because it's funny. The list is way longer, including Buddy the dog.
It's insane.
I mean, to the extent there were sort of a lot of surprising business associates who died, they were, back in Arkansas, both Clintons, doing business with a lot of sleazy people, with a lot of criminals, the whole Whitewater thing. And when you're doing business with sleazy people, it's not Hillary ordering a hit, but they often die. If you're doing business with the mob, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was like the Arkansas mob. And Vince Foster, for example, he was involved in the Whitewater. I think he was the lawyer on it. And that was dirty from top to bottom. It was about to be exposed. If you care, I think Byron York was the one looking at it all the time. I think the blood seeped into the ground, or it was a BS story, or the autopsy photos were fake. But you're all going to look like Pierre Salinger if you keep pushing this. He had to flee to France because he believed
Jillian,
conspiracy theory online.
The conspiracy theories seem a little dopey, I'm going to be honest. But if Trump genuinely believes it, I mean, he's posting it on social media.
I don't think he believes it.
I don't think he believes it either.
It's funny.
I don't think
and it is funny.
Yeah, and I think Trump loves to troll. I think that's what that was about. And if he did genuinely believe it, I mean, you could, get the DOJ to investigate these deaths.
That's the question. Does he at some point? I mean, no. Okay,
This is paranoia. There is enough real dirt on the Clintons so that we don't even need to go there. There are literal substantiated reports of, frankly, their evil, their malice, their selfishness, extreme selfishness in the ways that they dealt with allies and enemies alike. These are two extremely selfish, power-hungry individuals. I would say even almost soulless. Their one compass is power. Their only sovereign is money and wealth and power. Their entire life, their one mission of both laws actually is the presidency. And Hillary Clinton, she lived for this. This is the reason for her existence. That's why when she lost, she was so crushed, because that was the entire purpose of her life. From the moment she stepped foot on Yale Law School, on the campus of Yale Law School, and met Bill Clinton, they made a deal that it was going to be him first, then it was going to be her. And the two of them are just deeply power-hungry individuals. And I would even throw a third in there. Chelsea Clinton's like that too. And I know that because I worked on her campaign. I have friends who are still in that circle. They sold ambassadorships to friends. And
every president does.
Different? Exactly. That was my question.
Yeah, ambassadorships.
What makes that any different than any other president?
Because they took it to another degree.
How then, if they're not killing people, though? That's kind of my point.
Yes, I think that's a bigger
sort
story.
of my point. Like, if they're not, it's all the same. They're all corrupted. They're all bought off.
I mean, that was the emails, right? The email situation. How many emails did they uncover? Like 13,000? And then there was, I think, like 17,000 that they were, that they were still unable to recover.
Server? Yeah.
What they found was bad. So that begs, I'm just playing devil's advocate since all of you think it's a super conspiracy theory. Okay.
Yeah, maybe have fun with it, but let's establish the fact that, Ann's the OG insider.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to let you put this to bed. But I mean,
not sure I did.
So maybe it's not the Clintons directly, but clearly there are people who were covering up for them if they were able to get those emails hidden, right? Could it possibly be that they wanted to silence some things, and maybe it wasn't them directly, but powerful accomplices that they had? How were they able to hide those emails in the first place?
Well, they destroyed the server.
Yeah,
they literally went like
beat
this.
it with hammers.
Exactly. They breached the server themselves. And the way that Hillary Clinton went after the women who credibly accused her husband of, affairs and sexual harassment, all of that, the way that she herself treated those women is just, it completely undermines her facade as being a feminist, as someone who stands up for women. She's a
But they're still alive. They're still alive.
Okay, what about this?
This is a pretty gross scandal, and I do remember hearing about that for years, and it's like this woman, that woman, this woman, that one. I remember when Trump marched them all out.
That was great.
At that debate, I thought, like, oh my God, this is all kabuki. None of this is real, but then the question becomes, like, if that's real, what else could be real?
But the thing is, can I ask you guys a question? Do you think that there's even a 0.001 small percent chance that the person who attempted to assassinate Trump wasn't just this lone shooter or anything like that? That it could have been the deep state, that it could have some type of...
No.
I totally disagree with you.
Actually, I find it strange that we haven't gotten any updates on any investigation into both of those individuals, right?
That's a whole show. That's so sketchy. And
it's weird.
I don't know. That is just, there's so much there.
I love how we found out more about the bomber on New Year's Day than we did about the attempted assassin against Trump.
I mean, we've seen in the JFK files, the CIA, nothing that spells it out in black and white. They could have possibly been complicit. I mean,
there was nothing in the RFK files. I don't think there's been any more on the Butler shooter because there's nothing to it. He's dead. There is no investigation. He was a nut.
What about the other guy, though?
The other guy, I mean, it's not an investigation. I guess he's going to be prosecuted, but in prosecutions generally, I wouldn't mind hearing more, but we'll find it when he goes to trial. For some reason, these criminal trials take a long time. I guess we'll see then. But no, I don't think any of these are conspiracies. I do think that this isn't a conspiracy, but the media has been utterly reckless in calling Trump a fascist who will destroy democracy.
And I bought into that.
And even having, James Comey do the 86-47, and he put those shells there himself. It's just reckless, and I don't think he shouldn't go to jail for it. But
Comey's
it's stunning for them to keep saying destroying democracy, destroying. Of course, nuts are going to act on it.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody believes them anymore, and that's why there's a trust deficit for not only the Democratic Party but the MSDNC. And yes, I'm calling them that.
They
and
believe
the
it at the New York Times.
And you know what? I'm going to be the first to apologize. I bought into the Trump derangement syndrome whole thing. I bought into the narrative that the Hunter Biden laptop was fake. I thought that I thought it was NBC News. This prominent news organization, they must be telling us the truth. But no, they lied to us. And not only did they lie to us, they marched out dozens of members from the esteemed American intellectual community, intelligence community, including Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken, who said that the laptop was Russian disinformation. That was all a lie. That laptop was real as fuck.
I just wish they let the laptop story play out.
I know.
It's like, who cares? Who cares?
Like, I know it's the sun.
Yeah, who cares? Okay, so he does drugs and he has sex with hookers. Like, who cares? But the fact that they tried to suppress it made it way more nefarious.
Agree, but I guess the argument is, he's a foreign agent who didn't register because he was working in Ukraine.
It's bigger than that because it would have laid out that Joe Biden was an influence peddler in the most extraordinary degree, and that he was a big guy, and that he was the one getting
the worst thing. $2 billion from Saudi. The worst thing about the laptop is the hardest to prove. What you're saying, how much was the big guy getting? It's the hardest to prove.
Not only that, Joe Biden
easy part to prove, nobody cares about.
Right.
And not only that, though, Joe Biden marched out his drug addict of a son and essentially had him acting as a bad man around the country, taking Hunter Biden with him on trips to China, for goodness sakes, around the world, doing business deals. Why would you need to take
why were you raising money for Biden then?
Because I need to understand. You did. I just told you.
No. I know you get real angry when people ask you that question, but you need to answer it because you didn't turn on the Bidens and the Democratic Party until after the election.
No.
Don't yell at me.
No.
Keep it down.
No.
Keep it down.
I just apologized at the very top of the segment, did I not? I said I bought into the Hunter.
I don't care about your apology. I want to understand your thinking.
You just asked me to repeat
all
myself.
These things were happening.
Anna,
why did you wait until after the election?
I didn't, though. Do you understand English? I just said I didn't.
do. You're lying, though.
No, I'm not. Did I not tell you that I went on Fox News Sunday before the debate exposing his cognitive decline?
Okay, but did you bring up your issues with the Hunter Biden laptop story? The fact that they were trying to control you behind the scenes?
I just said I bought into
She thought it was real.
I just told you 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
I thought it was real.
Okay.
And then when they lied to me about the millions that I raised, I thought, okay, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? And it took me months to realize they basically lied about everything.
It is funny how that works. The first lie for me was the COVID lie. This is the lab.
That was huge.
I was like, wait a minute. And
I think the shutdowns, I didn't even know if it came from the lab, but the entire COVID thing was a lie.
I remember listening to, I've mentioned this before, so forgive me if you've heard it, but I remember listening to Brett Weinstein break this down in March of 2020 on Rogan. He's an evolutionary biologist, so he was looking at different elements of where's the incubation population for this virus? Normally for a pandemic, the pathogen will incubate within a population, learn its host, and become more dangerous. Where's the host animal? All these different things. And then in particular, the smoking gun was this fear and cleavage site that appeared to have been spliced into the virus's genome. And it had never been seen. And
that turned out to be false. But forget the lab. The shutdowns were a lie. We need everyone masked was a lie. They destroyed the American economy. That was a lie.
I mean,
in
what
the
about
end,
the schools?
who cares whether it was the wet
Kids
market
are still
or the
suffering
lab?
from that.
It came from China.
I think we all experienced so much collective trauma during COVID, and I think that was a part of the agenda because when the resolve of an entire country is weakened, then that's when they can come in and they can impose their agenda much easier as well. The whole COVID thing, so evil, so nefarious, and I think the fact that literally a few years ago, you were being completely deplatformed, decredited, called a crazy conspiracy theorist if you were to speculate about this theory.
Or even
and now
ivermectin.
Now it's a universally accepted narrative.
Or the shutdowns.
Yeah, of course. Well, that just, I'm going to put a button on this one right now. That would be the only reason, is that I would even entertain such a crazy concept of the Clintons having this string of murders, because you're just kind of like, well,
So
I
much
mean,
smoke.
I
Yeah,
never
you're right.
thought
Right.
You're right.
this is possible. All right, moving swiftly onward. Thank
You're
you for putting
totally
that one
right.
to bed for me.
This is how conspiracy theories develop. You can't trust the media.
Right,
You can't trust
you, Ann.
health professionals.
Yeah.
That's how conspiracy theories develop.
Yeah.
Well, that just means that we have to do the homework and talk to credible experts and before forming opinions. All right, our next one. Serious questions are swirling around the Trump administration's handling of the Alien Enemies Act. So reports suggest that they have ignored multiple court orders in recent deportation cases that are raising alarms about executive overreach. So let's take a look here.
Judge's order just earlier today, quote, patently unlawful, end quote, and said that it was an assault on democracy itself. Does that mean that the administration is ignoring this order, and might you ignore future court orders that meet the criteria you laid out?
The President of the United States and his administration reserve all rights under the Constitution to conduct national security operations in defense of the United States. The Alien Enemies Act, which was passed into law by the founding generation of this country, men like John Adams, was written explicitly to give the president the authority to repel an alien invasion of the United States. That is not something that a district court judge has any authority whatsoever to interfere with, to enjoin, to restrict, or to restrain any way. You can read the law yourself. There's not one clause in that law that makes it subject to judicial review, let alone district court review.
I know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I mean,
I can see it in your eyes.
So, look, whatever you think about the use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport people who are here illegally, put that aside for a second. First of all, I don't agree with its usage. We can adjudicate that in a bit. But
okay.
My bigger issue at the moment is that in that answer we just heard from Miller, it seems pretty clear that they do not intend to follow through with a federal judge's order. Now, to give you a sense of how I am not hypocritical on this issue, when Biden was still president and a federal judge, weighed in on the abortion pill and Democrats didn't like the decision, AOC went on cable news and essentially said the Biden administration should just ignore the court order. No, you shouldn't ignore it. No, hell no. I'm in favor of keeping the abortion pill legal, obviously. But at the same time, you open a disastrous can of worms, a constitutional crisis, when you have people in power just ignoring the federal courts, throwing our system of checks and balances away. We have to protect our system of government. That's the thing I'm concerned about.
Well, what
here.
the Trump administration is saying, that this doesn't even fall under the jurisdiction of the courts. This is under the president's purview to protect us against an alien invasion. That's what Trump is saying. I actually happen to agree with him. There's no way we're going to be able to deport millions of people if we have to do this case by case.
On the abortion thing, that was interpreting an agency action, which is explicitly something
the
that
FDA.
courts can review. Whereas here, this is foreign policy, this is commander-in-chief, and I have long said this. Courts have no role on this whatsoever. The constitutional crisis is they're butting into the commander-in-chief's
You're
roles.
suggesting it's the reverse, that the courts are out of line.
Absolutely.
With regard
That's
to
the
judicial branch
crisis.
of the government.
It's outrageous what they're doing.
But
gosh, I have not heard that one before.
Hold
Ann.
on, though. The question is, people coming into the country illegally is different from a foreign government, like literally invading the United States.
Not. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
So, I mean, a federal judge thinks it does matter.
A federal judge has no authority on this. Elian Gonzalez, Cuban, arrives in Florida. He completely lost under state law, and the Supreme Court rules immigration is part of foreign policy. It's up to the president, whatever he wants.
But
to do.
wasn't
This
that a
precedent is
different-
what you're saying.
Immigration is
think that's
part
a good
of his
story.
foreign
Well,
policy.
can I ask
It was a
this?
bad story, but I mean, Democrats will send a small 8-year-old boy back to a communist dictatorship. All
His
we
father
want to
wanted
do
him back.
is get rid of terrorists. That's what we're trying to do. But the point is, constitutionally, courts have absolutely no role. And
Why does it say then in the Constitution? I'm asking honestly. It doesn't say citizens are entitled to due process. It says persons.
Due process under the Constitution means you have a neutral fact finder, and the person is allowed to respond, and that's it. So if an immigration officer says, we think you're Tren de Aragua, we're deporting you, if he's allowed to respond, that's due process under the Constitution. This idea that it has to be, a full court hearing and we're paying for the attorney and then it gets appealed to the appellate court.
Exactly.
No, you need one finder of fact. You need to let the person accused respond. The end.
Okay. And there was a mandate on this as well. This is one of the topics that the heat index on this issue was so high because it was literally in people's front yards. They were being affected by it. Little kids, the women that were raped by some of these people that came in here. This truly is a state of emergency. And every single day that slips by that Trump is unable to fulfill on that mandate is going to grow weaker. So I'm okay with him enacting whatever he needs to do to get it out. There's a huge difference, as we established in the last episode, between legal and illegal immigration. Coming here the proper way through the proper channels. Anybody who doesn't do that and who cannot do that needs to get out.
That's not the conversation right now.
You're right, there's due process. I'm just saying it's much less than people think.
That's fair, but there needs to be due process. I mean, what we've seen is literally the Trump administration's lawyers admitting in court filings that
there was
in
an
some
administrative
cases,
error.
They made administrative errors and accidentally deported the wrong people, right? So that's why, look.
Those weren't really Trump lawyers. Those were career DOJ attorneys, which is why they have been fired since then.
Well, here's my question.
Nonetheless, it was an administrative error. That guy was in the country legally.
No, the administrative error was one of the judges. He had been ordered, deported twice by 2 immigration judges.
He had an asylum.
The alleged administrative error was, at one point, he wasn't supposed to be sent back to El Salvador because he had been in a rival gang, and the other gang had the upper hand. And I'm fleeing violence. Yeah, that's because you shot those guys.
Hold on.
So he was allegedly, a few rulings back, was not supposed to be sent to El Salvador. He wasn't just being deported to El Salvador. He was sent to a prison that happens to be within the bounds of El Salvador.
I think it's super dangerous.
And the career attorney is calling it an administrative error.
I think we have to be careful with what we're co-signing here, because it is dangerous to create a situation in which the federal government can just point at anyone, accuse them of anything, and then deport them.
Hold on. Anna, there's strong evidence to suggest he was a member of MS-13.
Okay, what's the evidence?
So first of all, you do have symbols that mean MS-13. Second of all, 2 different judges did determine that he was. There was an informant that came forward in these cases. Mm-hmm. They said, we have evidence that he's MS-13. He was pulled over by police, arguably trafficking 8 guys. They called ICE. ICE never showed up, but they had no luggage. They had no tools.
It seemed as though in that video he might have been maybe smuggling people, right?
Okay.
So that video does not look good. I will confess on that.
But listen, they deported him. He then, based on this evidence, he then turns around and says, no, I need asylum because I'm worried other gangs will kill me, which inherently implies a rival gang.
Right.
But we can turn around and have him be like, no, they wanted to recruit me when I was 5, so I'm afraid they'll recruit me again as a grown-ass man in prison.
Yeah.
Then the president of El Salvador goes, yeah, that's my guy. The issue, as far as I can tell, is he turns around and says, I want asylum. They withhold his deportation.
They did, yeah.
And he didn't get the asylum hearing. And the Supreme Court is like, no, you got to bring him back for his asylum hearing. That's the due process piece. And it's not just this incident. There are others.
Yes, exactly.
So hence the concept of a constitutional crisis is if you're defying the Supreme Court, what is
the courts are defying the president is the point. Why is it always courts win? They don't under the Constitution. They are the 3rd branch of government. They're co-equal branches, and the president holds all of the power of one branch of government in his hands and his hands alone. The judicial power is spread out over 600 and some number of judges. The legislative power over 435, and of course the agencies. The president alone holds 1/3 of the power of the Constitution, and these little pipsqueak judges coming in and thinking they can boss around the commander-in-chief is preposterous.
It brings up
They're the highest court in life. I'm only asking you.
They're equal.
And you bring up a really good point.
And the Supreme Court, or the Constitution, does not give the Supreme Court any authority over foreign policy.
And you brought up a really good point a few segments ago. You said that due process, now they expect due process to mean this entire array of judges. You have this, you have this right to go before a whole panel of judges. It doesn't have to work like that. When Secretary of State,
why don't we throw that whole process out?
Because
wait, like the president accuse you of anything, and then you don't get your day in court. It'll be great.
No, you do get your day.
It's just not a huge trial, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, sorry, go ahead, Lindy.
Because when Secretary of State Rubio makes a determination that you lied on your visa to come in here, if you applied for a student visa to study something, and then you come in and then you incite violence against the United States government or our allies, you lied, because we would not have brought you in had you been more forthcoming on your visa. You got into this country under false pretenses. And so the due process was granted to him, and that was a determination of the Secretary of State. You're not entitled to sit before a panel of judges and for us to pay for your attorneys. Why?
Well, if I could bring up one other thing. Now, do you have the clip of Hillary Clinton where she talks about how we're deporting migrants, in particular illegal migrants, and they're the ones having babies, and of course we want to stimulate the population and the birth rate? I know this seems unrelated, but I promise I'll tie it back together in a second here.
Because we had a lot of immigrants, legally and undocumented, who had a, larger than normal, by American standards, family. So this is just another one of their, make America great again by returning to the lifestyles and the economic arrangements of not just the 1950s. I mean, let's keep going back.
So what she's saying in this clip is she's essentially talking about the fact that Republicans are trying to stimulate the birth rate, but this is all baloney because they're deporting illegals who are the ones that would stimulate the birth rate. So obviously she's trying to say that they're racist and so on and so forth. But if I could just point this out, her husband deported 12 million illegal migrants. Trump has deported 1. And there is no universe where you could possibly adjudicate 12 million cases. So
we should do that.
Well,
again.
I'm confused.
A lot of those folks were turned back at the border, right? So they're trying to enter, they get caught, he turned them back. Right now, because of Trump's, hardline stance on immigration, people aren't flooding the border anymore. So it's harder for him to deport people because he has to go into the country and find people who are here illegally.
Not address the birth rate thing. I think this is utterly retarded. We do not need more people being born. We absolutely do not need more immigrants. Immigrants, the only people who don't collect more from the government than they pay in are citizens. Immigrants take more than they pay in. Illegal immigrants take a lot more than they pay in. It's costing us in housing. Costs go up. You have to house more people. You have to educate more people. You have to build more parks. You have to have English as a second language. The American middle class is paying for legal and illegal immigrants. And this idea that we need more people for one reason, to support the Ponzi scheme of Social Security. Name one other reason we need more people. If we had cut off immigration in 1890,
Social Security, I think, would collapse because they do pay taxes. It's just that they don't get the benefits because of the fact that they have stolen Social Security numbers.
Oh, they're collecting Social Security.
And they pay, I don't know about Social Security. They don't get Social Security. They don't qualify for federal benefits, but they do qualify for some state welfare programs.
Anchor babies do.
And you know why?
That's why they get so much.
But you know why it's harder?
$10 to $11 billion a year.
No, they are taking more than they're paying.
There's a $50 billion disparity there. At least the last time I looked into it was a few weeks ago, unless I read the numbers wrong, because I've had this discussion. Can you fact check that, Nat, and then we'll wrap it up?
And you know why it's harder for Trump to deport now?
How much do we spend on illegal immigration, like tax-wise, and how much do they pay into the system? I feel like it was like $96 billion versus $150 billion, but
you can check in my book, Adios America. It is footnoted. The URL is there. the actual numbers.
And one reason why it's so much harder for Trump to deport people is that we now have sanctuary cities like my own city of Philadelphia, where you have a mayor who's complicit in this illegal immigration scheme and just housing these people and busing them into the city and providing them with, a sanctuary.
What was the source for this?
The right incentives aren't in place for good immigrants to come in. They're in place for bad immigrants to come in.
2023. And does it say how much they paid into the system, though? Because I feel like it was almost 100
But
billion.
it has to be net for them to come up with 150, right?
I think so.
Well, I have the net in my
And
book.
there you go. Okay, before I wrap us up here, final thoughts, team. No? We're ready to close it out?
I didn't know this was 2 hours. That's my final thought. Good grief, I'm exhausted.
And
I want a Nicorette, I want a coffee.
Where do we get more from you?
Oh, AnnCoulter.substack.com. That's where I am now. My videos, podcasts, columns, right in your inbox.
Awesome. All right, guys. If you enjoyed the show, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. It helps us out a ton. We'll see you next time.